Richard E. Byrd, first to blaze an air route to the North Pole, prepares for a similar flight over the bottom of the Earth.
For nearly 80 years, the real story of Admiral Richard E. Byrd's Antarctic expedition has remained buried under classified files and silent witnesses. Official reports called it a scientific mission, but those who were there knew something else happened on the ice. Now, before his death, Chief Petty Officer Robert Johnson, the last surviving member of that expedition, has finally spoken out. What he revealed is more than history. It's a secret that could rewrite everything we know about Earth. Why was Operation High Jump armed like an invasion? What vanished team was never recorded in official logs? And what did Admiral Byrd himself admit to seeing beneath the ice? In this video, we'll uncover why Robert Johnson took nearly 8 decades to say, and why government wanted it buried. Stay with us to uncover the truth. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear may change how you see history itself. Let's find out. The man who conquered both poles. Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd Jr. wasn't just another explorer. He was a legend who redefined what it meant to push the boundaries of human endurance and discovery. Born in 1888 into a prominent Virginia family, Byrd had already claimed to be the first person to fly over the North Pole in 1926, making him a household name across America and earning him the Congressional Medal of Honor. His piercing blue eyes and commanding presence made him the perfect poster boy for American exploration. But beneath his polished exterior lay a man consumed by an insatiable hunger for the unknown. It was this relentless drive that would lead him to Antarctica time and again, each expedition more secretive than the last. But it was his obsession with Antarctica that would define his legacy and ultimately lead to some of the most classified operations in naval history. Byrd's first Antarctic expedition in 1928 had established him as the foremost polar explorer of his generation. But it had also revealed something that would haunt him for the rest of his career. The pristine white continent held secrets that went far beyond geographical discovery, secrets that would require the highest levels of military clearance and governmental oversight to pursue. When young Robert Johnson first met Admiral Byrd in 1939, he was just a 19-year-old Sea Scout from San Diego, eager for adventure and completely unprepared for the secrets he would carry for the rest of his life. Johnson had volunteered for what he believed would be a straightforward scientific expedition, drawn by stories of heroic exploration and the promise of serving his country. The meeting took place in a dimly lit naval facility in Norfolk, Virginia, where Byrd personally interviewed each potential expedition member. Johnson later recalled the intensity of that first encounter. Admiral Byrd looked right through me, like he could see into my soul. He asked me strange questions, not about my sailing experience or survival skills, but about my ability to keep secrets and my loyalty to the United States. Byrd saw something special in Johnson, a quiet determination and unwavering loyalty that would make him the perfect witness to history's most extraordinary polar expedition. Unlike many of the other volunteers who boasted about their adventures and qualifications, Johnson possessed a rare combination of competence and discretion that Byrd recognized as essential for what lay ahead. The Admiral had learned from his previous expeditions that the most dangerous discoveries weren't the ones that killed you. They were the ones that challenged everything humanity thought it knew about the world. Little did Johnson know that he was about to become part of a mission that would challenge everything humanity believed about the bottom of the world. The Admiral Byrd expedition wasn't just about exploration. It was about uncovering truths that governments around the world weren't ready to accept. As Johnson would later reveal, Byrd's expeditions were driven by discoveries so profound that they had to be kept secret from the general public for decades. The stakes were nothing less than the fundamental understanding of human civilization itself, the frozen fortress of secrets. Antarctica in the 1940s was far more than a frozen wasteland. It was a vast, untouched world of mystery hiding secrets powerful enough to tip the global balance of power. Endless stretches of ice and snow reached beyond the horizon, forming a landscape so strange and hostile that it felt like another planet. Yet beneath that cold, silent surface lay treasures nations would do anything to control. Rich veins of uranium, coal, and rare minerals capable of fueling entire industrial empires for generations. When Admiral Byrd launched his daring series of expeditions between 1928 and 1956, the world was teetering on the edge of the Cold War. Every major nation knew that whoever gained control of Antarctica would command unimaginable resources and strategic dominance that could alter the course of human civilization. The political stakes were staggering. To the public, these missions looked like noble scientific quests into the unknown. But behind the scenes, world leaders knew the truth. Antarctica was the last unclaimed frontier on Earth, a landmass bigger than the United States and Mexico combined, sitting at the planet's southernmost point like a frozen crown jewel waiting for its owner. The race for sovereignty had begun, and Admiral Byrd stood as America's chosen player in this global chess match for power. Robert Johnson, now breaking his silence after decades, described Antarctica as a place where the impossible became real, where the very laws of nature bent in ways that shattered human understanding. His aged hands shook as he remembered those early days when he was young, fearless, and utterly unprepared for the psychological toll of witnessing things that couldn't be explained. Antarctica, he said, had a way of changing people, forcing them to confront the limits of their perception and the nature of reality itself. His voice carried the weight of time as he spoke of the eerie silence that haunted the continent, a silence so deep it could drive a man to madness, broken only by the groaning and cracking of ice under unimaginable pressure from the depths below. Survival. There wasn't just about withstanding deadly cold. It was about navigating a world that seemed to disobey the basic rules of existence. Johnson recalled regions where compasses spun in chaos, where the southern lights twisted in patterns that seemed alive, and where the ice glowed faintly from within, pulsing like it had a heartbeat of its own. These weren't the delusions of frost-bitten explorers. They were consistent, documented reports from multiple members of the expedition, each account stranger than the last. During the 1939 to 1941 United States Antarctic Service mission, Johnson saw phenomena that military officials immediately stamped as top secret. Those endless ice fields weren't just frozen water. They concealed massive geological structures, deep caverns, and discoveries that could rewrite Earth's history. His most chilling memory was standing at the edge of a crevasse that seemed to plunge straight into the planet's core. The walls shimmered with an eerie, phosphorescent light, radiating warmth that had no place in the Antarctic cold. Johnson's testimony paints a picture of a continent far more complex and mysterious than anyone had dared to believe. The Byrd expeditions, he claimed, stumbled upon something that would forever change the story of exploration, turning Antarctica from a land of science and wonder into humanity's most closely guarded secret, Operation High Jump. To the public, Operation High Jump looked like a test run, a bold but harmless training exercise in Earth's harshest environment. But for those who were there, and for those who later uncovered what was buried in classified archives, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was never just a drill. The scale alone defied logic for a scientific mission. 13 ships, including the massive aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea, 33 aircraft, over 4,000 men, naval infantry, armored vehicles, and heavy artillery. You don't bring that kind of firepower to study penguins, and you certainly don't call a mission high jump, unless you expect something that can strike from above. Officially, Washington insisted it was all about survival training. Yet according to declassified Cold War defense files and the Arctic Institute's research, Antarctica had quietly become the newest chessboard in a global power game. Whoever built a permanent foothold there would gain an enormous strategic edge, and the real fear was that someone else might have beaten them to it. After World War II, whispers circulated about Nazi remnants escaping to hidden strongholds beneath the Antarctic ice. Dismissed as rumor by most, these tales gained traction when intelligence reports confirmed that German U-boats had been tracked heading toward the Southern Ocean. One even surrendered months after Germany's defeat, near the coast of Argentina. Chief Robert Johnson remembered that uneasy atmosphere vividly. There was a feeling on board, not fear, but readiness. We were sharp, on alert. We weren't told everything, but we knew something big was going on. Once Byrd's fleet reached the continent, their mission orders changed overnight. Aerial patrols increased dramatically. Ground teams were suddenly sent into zones previously marked as unstable or off-limits. One particular unit, Johnson said, was dispatched to a mountainous area where the snow behaved unnaturally. It melted in strange patterns, like something warm was moving beneath it. Not geothermal heat, but something different, something controlled. That team vanished without a trace. Soon after their disappearance, Operation High Jump was abruptly shut down. The official explanation cited extreme weather and logistical exhaustion. Yet internal memos revealed that Admiral Byrd and several senior officers had privately reported conditions too dangerous to continue, and a few reports even hinted at engagements, suggesting hostile encounters. No names, no details. When Byrd returned home, he was a changed man, quiet, withdrawn, and cautious with his words. His expedition report was heavily censored, with key sections locked away for more than 60 years. The Navy brushed it off as standard procedure. Years later, Johnson claimed that one night aboard ship, Byrd confided in him. "We saw something out there we weren't supposed to see," he said softly, "and now we can't go back." That single line haunted Johnson for the rest of his life. What had Byrd meant? What had they seen or met that forced them to turn back? And who or what were they really confronting beneath that endless ice? One fact stood above the rest. This wasn't about Cold War training, territorial mapping, or military logistics. It was a test, a warning, and maybe even a clash with something beyond comprehension. Antarctica, Johnson believed, wasn't empty, not entirely. Whatever Operation High Jump uncovered, or awakened, remained buried under layers of secrecy. No government would ever admit it. Not then, not ever, until now. The lost files and the silent years. After Operation High Jump ended abruptly in early 1947, it was like a curtain dropped over everything. There were no documentaries, no presidential statements, and no follow-up missions for over a decade. It was just silence. Admiral Byrd gave one final press conference in South America and then disappeared from public view. His tone had shifted. He looked tired, some say frightened. In that now infamous interview, he warned of a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Back then, it vanished. The clip was buried. Transcripts were altered. And just like that, Byrd's strange statement became nothing more than a Cold War footnote, erased before it ever made the newsreels. Why? It turns out not everything about Operation High Jump was declassified. In fact, large portions of the mission logs, aerial footage, and satellite records from the U.S. Navy were never released to the public. According to Freedom of Information Act filings, multiple reports were lost in transport, destroyed in archive floods, or simply marked as classified indefinitely. Chief Robert Johnson remembered some of those missing reports because he saw them. There were photographs, he recalled. Aerial shots we took on a clear day. No clouds, no storms. There were structures, geometric patterns in the ice, doors, even massive doors. But those photos were gone. Other records went missing too. Flight logs for the lost aircraft, incident reports, and even entire team manifests. Some crew members' names were removed from final personnel lists, almost like they'd never been there at all. Between 1947 and Byrd's death in 1957, he never led another Antarctic mission of that scale. He gave brief public interviews, usually discussing weather patterns or base construction. But anytime someone asked about Operation High Jump, he changed the subject. The government remained tight-lipped as well. Antarctica, once a Cold War flashpoint, was suddenly off the strategic radar. The 1959 Antarctic Treaty was signed, turning the entire continent into a zone for peaceful scientific exploration. No weapons, no military operations, and no questions asked. To Johnson, that treaty was a smokescreen. They wanted to seal it off, he said. Make it untouchable, because whatever we found, they couldn't let anyone else find it too. In the decades that followed, Johnson watched the world forget. He watched Byrd's legacy turn into textbook history. He watched conspiracy theories pop up only to be laughed away. But he never laughed because he was there. And he remembered how carefully the truth was buried. Sometimes, he said, it felt like living in two timelines, the one the world believed and the one he lived through. The hardest part wasn't the silence. He admitted it was knowing the silence was manufactured. For 78 years, he said nothing. Not because he was afraid, but because no one was ready. Until now, the last man standing. For decades, Chief Robert Johnson was just a name, one of thousands of enlisted men who served during the Cold War. But when the final roster of Operation High Jump veterans was quietly published in the 1990s, one thing stood out. Johnson was the last one left. Born in 1924 in Norfolk, Virginia, Johnson enlisted in the Navy at 18. He was practical, loyal, and by all accounts, unremarkable. That's probably why he was chosen. Men like him didn't ask questions. They followed orders. But after Operation High Jump, Johnson changed. He stayed in the Navy for another 2 decades, then retired and disappeared into civilian life. No memoirs, no interviews, and no military reunions. It was as if his greatest adventure never happened. He lived quietly, worked in logistics, and never brought up Antarctica, not even to his family, until his 99th birthday. That's when he decided to speak. "I'm not trying to prove anything," he said in a recorded interview from his home in Virginia. "I'm just trying to leave the truth behind." The truth he shared wasn't wild or sensational. He didn't talk about aliens or flying saucers, but what he revealed lined up with fragments from declassified files and filled in gaps no historian ever could. He spoke of the strange humming under the ice, the patrol that vanished, and the night Admiral Byrd walked into the communications tent looking like he'd seen a ghost, refusing to record the flight path he had just taken. Johnson even remembered being part of a small security team, ordered to guard a geothermal structure, something clearly not natural. "It had stairs in the middle of a glacier," Johnson said, shaking his head. "They told us it was part of an old weather station. but I know concrete when I see it." He recalled one officer panicking and trying to take photos. The camera was seized, and the officer was discharged a few days later. No packing, no explanations. Johnson said they flew him out immediately. After Byrd's final press conference, Johnson was transferred to a communications post back in the States. He tried to move on, but the memories of Antarctica never really left him. When the internet age arrived and videos and conspiracy theories began spreading, he watched them all. Most were nonsense, he said, but a few came disturbingly close. So why speak now? Johnson's eyes filled with tears when asked, "Because people deserve to know. And because I'm tired of carrying someone else's silence. I didn't sign up to be a liar." His weathered voice carried decades of restraint. But what did he truly reveal? Something buried beneath the ice. Something that changed everything they thought they knew. Someone wanted it to stay hidden. But Johnson finally said, "It's time to tell everything." 18th. The survivor finally speaks. Nearly 80 years had passed since Operation High Jump, but when Chief Robert Johnson sat down before the camera, his hands trembling slightly, his voice roughened by age, the entire room went silent. He wasn't reading from notes. He didn't need to. "The Admiral and I," he began, "we weren't close. But that last night, he looked me straight in the eye and said, 'You were there. You know what we saw.' Then he told me, 'Never forget.' And Johnson never did. He leaned forward then, his gaze narrowing as if the memories were flashing right before him. 'There was another mission inside the mission,' he said quietly. 'Not everyone knew. Maybe 24 of us at most, flown out in small, unrecorded teams, dropped near locations already marked as explored. But those coordinates, they made no sense.' What Johnson revealed next was deeply unsettling. We landed near what looked like just another giant ridge of ice. Nothing unusual, except it was warm. Not just a little warm, but radiating heat. And there was this vibration, like the air itself was humming. Their team was ordered to investigate. What they found was a fissure, narrow but unmistakably unnatural. The snow around it had melted into strange geometric shapes. The opening led into a tunnel, part ice, part something else entirely. It wasn't rock, it wasn't metal. It was both, smooth, curved, and eerily engineered. They were told not to enter, but one officer did. He never came back. Another man went in after him, Johnson continued. He had a line tied around his waist. When we pulled him out, he was unconscious. His face was pale, eyes open but frozen. He never spoke again, not a single word. They discharged him and sent him to a facility in Maryland. Soon after, Johnson's entire team was evacuated. The area was bombed days later, supposedly for testing. But Johnson insists that was no coincidence. They were erasing it. Whatever we found, it wasn't supposed to exist. When asked if he thought it was extraterrestrial, Johnson paused for a long time. "I don't know," he said slowly. "It could have been ancient, something we didn't build, but discovered. Whatever it wasn't natural, and it sure wasn't ours." He said Admiral Byrd confided in him the night before everything was shut down. Byrd had been pacing, trembling, and muttering about the implications. He said, "This changes everything we think we know about this world." Then he just stopped talking. After that night, Byrd followed orders, and Johnson followed silence. But now, nearing the end of his life, Johnson couldn't hold it in any longer. "I don't care if people believe me," he said. "I was there. So were others. Most of them are gone now, but I'm not. And I made him a promise I'd never forget, and I haven't." Legacy of the Truth. Operation High Jump vanished from public memory almost as soon as it ended. A few historians mentioned it in passing. A few documentaries skimmed the surface. But the real story, the one that mattered, was buried under decades of silence, secrecy, and ice. And now, Chief Robert Johnson is the last living witness. His confession shows just how far governments will go to hide a secret, and how a single truth can weigh on a man for a lifetime. Johnson never claimed to have all the answers. He never tried to sell his story. In fact, he only agreed to share it with a small team of researchers and one camera, quietly backed by a historical truth archive. No media, no sponsors, no agenda, just the truth. When I look back, he said, I don't think we were meant to understand what we found. We weren't ready then. Maybe we're still not ready now. Maybe that's the real mystery. Not what they saw, but what it meant. Was it alien, ancient, a lost civilization, or just the first glimpse of technology far beyond our understanding? Whatever it was, it terrified Admiral Byrd. It silenced an entire naval task force, and it left a young sailor with a burden he carried for almost 80 years. Chief Johnson's final words weren't dramatic. They were honest. People think the Cold War was fought with bombs and spies, but I saw another kind of war. One nobody wrote about. One still hidden. That's the part that should scare us the most. Today, Antarctica is sealed off by international treaties. No military bases, no mining, just science and flags. Johnson believed this wasn't by chance. They're not protecting the land, he said. They're protecting what's under it. The legacy of Operation High Jump isn't just in naval logs or lost flight reports. It's in the invisible line between what we're told and what we're never allowed to know. It's in the eyes of a man who waited nearly a century to reveal what he saw, and still wondered if he should. It's in the silence of Admiral Byrd, who spent his last years in near total privacy, his famous expedition reduced to whispers and half-truths. Now, that silence is broken. Do you think Antarctica still hides secrets? Drop your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.